Welcome to We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only show dedicated to the process and strategies for transforming apartment buildings to thriving communities. I am your host, John Brackett, and welcome to the show. All right, folks, welcome to another great episode of We Build Great Apartment Communities, the only place where you come to learn how to take apartment buildings and turn them into amazing communities. So today I have a very special guest. His name is Gene Guarino, and Gene specializes in assisted and senior living. So a very unique opportunity to talk to someone who's directly impacting a very unique segment of our marketplace, but improving lives through that space. And so one of the reasons why I was really excited to have him on, because here's someone that runs parallel to our purpose of building out great apartment communities and improving how people live. So I am your host, John Brackett. Gene, welcome to the show, bud.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, my pleasure. My pleasure. So, Gene, I'm going to introduce you to our audience, okay, just so that they have some background for what you do and who you are. So, Gene is the founder of the Residential Assisted Living Academy. The RAL Academy is the premier source for education in owning, operating, and investing in residential assisted living and senior housing. So that's awesome because we're going to talk a little bit about that and some distinctions between the two. And so Gene has trained, of course, thousands of people, been an owner-operator himself. So very excited to start this conversation. Gene, welcome, and always great to have amazing people on the show.
I appreciate it. I've heard a lot about you on the show, and I'm looking forward to talking to your listeners today.
Awesome, man. And they're looking forward to speaking with you and learning, from one of the best in the industry. So Gene, share with me and us rather your background and how you got into assisted living and retirement communities. I think that there's a growing opportunity there for many years to come. There's a lot of runway there still yet. So could you share with our audience how you got into this space and why you're so passionate about this particular market area?
Well, my story actually goes way back to when I was 18 years old. That's my first real estate. I was a teenager and I was a professional musician, had a recording studio, a small record label, and a music school. So it was myself and my brother. We were tenants for 2 years, and then we ended up buying a property. And that was no money down because I had no money, not because I knew anything.
I like that.
No credit, no money, no clue. So we bought that property and we did more fix and flip, buy and hold. But, segue forward 40 years now, which is a long time. And the reason why I do what I do is I heard about it probably 20 years ago. And it was somebody in the front of the room in a big seminar saying there's all kinds of ways to make money in real estate. But when he mentioned senior housing, I said, wow, that just resonates with me that that's where everything is going. You always want to be ahead of the curve. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell me how to do it because he wasn't actually doing it. He was just saying, he's saying in the future it's going to be good. But about 10 years ago, when my own mother started to need help, and a lot of people can relate to that. Their parent or grandparent needs help, and you can't just quit the job and not take care of your own family. It became very real. So it was more of a personal than it was just a business something. And that's when I actually started to really look at it. And then I made the commitment to get started. And I actually got started 7.5 years ago.
Awesome. To me, this kind of hits home as well, right? Because I'll tell you a really, really quick story. So my grandmother, who has passed, but she lived to be 96 years old.
Ah, that's great.
Okay? And for the last couple of years, long story short, she was in an assisted living facility, small community out in Reno, Nevada. And, lost touch with her. It was really kind of ironic how that happened, right? And I'm not going to get into the details of that, but lost touch, finally figured out where she was, reached out to her, went to go visit her. And at that point, she had dementia, so she couldn't really... My name and my dad's name very similar. Okay. And so when I said, hey, Grandma, this is John, she thought that I was referring to her son. She was so excited to see me, or rather have someone there visiting with her. Man, I literally almost cried. And then to look around and look at the conditions, which were less than, I want to say, they were really poor, right? I mean, it just crushed me to death. Man, I never forgot that. And, called up my uncle and I was like, hey, man, what in the world do you have her doing here? This lady left with a pretty good estate. She used to own, actually, at one point, the largest bookstore in the entire country.
Wow.
Why is she here?
Wow.
Another story, right? For another day.
Yeah.
So the point there being is, yeah, this can be a very emotionally charged
Mm,
topic because we all have loved ones that at some point, the reality is we all get old.
yeah,
I think understanding a little bit about the space, not only from the viewpoint of investing, is really valuable, but it also
yeah,
sheds some light on some options that we have in the future for those that we care about the most, right? Especially as
yeah.
we start to age. So,
So
Gene,
true.
one of the questions that I have is, you talk about assisted living and then senior housing, right?
Hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about the differences between the two, just to add context
Sure.
to this conversation for our audience?
You bet. And I think a lot of times when people think of seniors and assisted living, they automatically think of like a nursing home, what I call a big box facility. It's nameless, faceless. You walk through the front door and you can smell the neglect. And when I say senior housing, I think a lot of times people think of the Golden Girls. So a single family home where there's four seniors living together, taking care of each other. So it's actually right in between is what we do. We use residential homes in a neighborhood and we convert them to an extent, but it's still a single family home for the seniors. In the home, there might be 6 or 8 or 15 or more seniors in that home, and there's caregivers that come and take care of them. But it's not doctors and nurses and gurneys. It's not that. It's not medical. It's just they can't stay at home by themselves. They can't take care of themselves, and they need 24-hour supervision. So that's the premise of the residential assisted living. Senior housing would be just that, taking a house, converting it kind of the Golden Girls style. Another word for that would be co-housing. So they're sharing that housing. And that could be a great segue into assisted living or a farm team, as I like to call it, because those people may need that kind of help in the future, the residential assisted living.
Okay, awesome. So, Gene, I didn't know that that existed, which was
Mm.
co-housing. I really like that
Oh, yeah.
because I see a lot of application moving forward, especially with converting residential properties or even smaller apartment buildings. And I think as seniors begin to live longer, there's a lot of demand there, right? Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe some of the
Sure.
distinctions there in co-housing and maybe some of the trends, right? Because I did not know that. I find that
Yeah.
pretty fascinating,
And, co-housing can be done with students, as you know, and the
right?
idea of sharing either by the room, they're renting an apartment or a house by the room, co-housing together. The distinction or difference there is that those are typically very temporary. It's a year at a time, maybe up to 4 years or more if they're going to college there or something like that. But with the seniors, when they move into a house where they're sharing that house together, they're going to be there for years, probably until they need to move into assisted living or they'll live the rest of their life there. So the senior housing itself, the opportunity is enormous. We talk about the baby boomers. I'm one. Anybody born between 1946 and 1964 is considered a baby boomer. But the people in assisted living are older than that. They're probably 10 years older than the front edge of that wave of what I call the silver tsunami of seniors, the baby boomers. The people in assisted living are probably mid 80s. They're for retirement, playing golf and pickleball. They're there because they need assistance and they're not ready for a nursing home, but they need some assistance. So that's the assisted living part. And then the co-housing part is really anybody who wants to share housing as opposed to live by themselves. It's not just a money issue. The idea of being together with peers their own age and having the camaraderie and that kind of family aspect of community is really important to all of us. But seniors, they're going to be facing that in droves coming up, millions and millions of people, a lot of need, a huge niche to be getting into.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, because I think this will be really great for our audience, is we're going to walk through the life cycle of one of these projects. Okay, I'm not going to
Okay.
pick one over the other, but let's just
Mhm.
walk through the cycle. Personally, I think the co-housing piece, it's really interesting. You hear a lot about student housing, but
Mhm.
never co-housing for seniors.
Seniors.
And yeah, so I
Mhm.
find that really, really fascinating. So let's walk
Mhm.
through an example.
Sure.
Right now, I had an opportunity to speak with one of your colleagues, and I think that's why
Mhm.
we're on this
You're right.
conversation today. But she spoke of a recent acquisition, I believe maybe it was in Texas, and I may be mistaken. So, what are some of the things that you're looking for when
Mhm.
you are trying to identify whether land, okay, to build ground up, okay, and then what do the metrics look like roughly, just broadly speaking, so we can start
Sure.
walking our
Sure.
audience through this?
So let's start with co-housing model, because in the co-housing model, you want to be more located near walkable things, whether it be shopping or the library for seniors or that type of thing, walkable distance to or short drive to get to things that they'll appreciate. When it comes to the assisted living, they're not driving anymore, so it's really not a matter of that. Their kids who are 50, 60 will come pick them up, bring them to something. But for co-housing, I think convenience is really one of the most important things. So let's walk through it this way. If you had a single family home that's 4-bedroom and 2-bath, kind of a normal cookie cutter home in the neighborhood, one family can rent that. They may pay $2,000 a month to rent it. Obviously, it's higher and lower in different areas. But if you rented it out by the room, it might be $1,000 a month per room. And they're sharing the kitchen and the family room and the bathrooms, etc. Maybe that includes the utilities, but now you're taking a single family home that you can cash flow, break even, make a little bit of profit with $2,000 a month. And if you're getting $4,000, $1,000 per room, now you could be making literally a couple $1,000s a month in profit from that same single family home. Those people will probably be in that home for years as well. They're not going to be moving out after a few years or when their kids grow up or something like that. They could be there for 5, 10 years or longer. So the metrics on the co-housing can work out really, really well. When you graduate to assisted living, then it's not so much walkable distance to someplace, but what I'm really looking for is the demographics. So when we say location, it's not riverfront, oceanfront, mountaintop. It's how many people live around, how much money do they make, and what are their ages. Somebody who's 50, 60 is the child of that adult who's going to be in assisted living. They're the ones who are deciding where they live and how much they pay. But the metrics on I'll go a little farther if you want. This will really spur a lot of questions. But in the residential assisted living, the average in America today, according to genworth.com, and they're a private long-term care insurance company, the average person in assisted living is paying $4,051 per month per person. So if you have 10 of those seniors in the home, which would be an average size home, that's potential gross income of $40,000 a month. After expenses, you as the owner and the investor in that might be netting 20 to 30% of that 40,000. So $8,000 to $12,000 a month would be your net from that single family home, operating it as a residential assisted living.
Interesting. So does that 20 or 30%, does that include debt service? Is that less debt service or is that before debt service?
That would be after debt service, which we'll call it rent because we're actually operating a business, this residential assisted living. So whether you rent it from yourself or rent it from somebody else, that would include that debt service.
Okay, cool. So when you're approaching these, you're separating the business component from the real estate component. Okay, I get it. Right. You're leasing back. Makes a lot of sense, right? Mitigating liability. All right, so I really appreciate the metrics there. That adds, some really good context. Also, the distinction between assisted living where you're looking for demographics. So when you're doing that, Gene, are you conducting the market study yourself with a team or do you outsource the market study component?
That's a great question. If you go to a bank, they're probably going to require that you do it officially with a market study, a market analysis. But actually, we teach people how to do what we call internal feasibility study. Internal meaning you're doing it yourself and you're not paying for it, but also the bank's probably going to say, no, we want you to pay somebody thousands of dollars to get to the same conclusion. Right. It's kind of silly, but that's reality. That analysis really comes down to kind of 3 elements. One is how many people live around that location, how many assisted living beds already exist, and that correlation between how many seniors are there, and there's a percentage of them that will need assisted living over the course of time, and the beds that exist will tell you if there's need for this or it's feasible to do the business there.
Okay, and then what is the point of saturation with beds in this particular market? What does that kind of look like?
Yeah, and I'm giving you big pictures. There's a lot of nuance to it. But if you take the 75 plus age group, and we're talking assisted living, so 75 plus age group, and say 15% of that population within your demographic area. So I don't mean an entire MSA. It could be a zip code. We usually actually talk within 20 minutes. So within 20 minutes of you, but you may not be able to get the nuance that way in demographic research, but a zip code and within 20 minutes or 20 miles, whatever you can get, that's what we're looking for. So once you find that, then there's places you can research how many beds exist, how many homes are there or larger facilities. And then it's a math calculation. But it's like a restaurant. And let me put it to you that way, that I'm sure you've been in areas where there's a street where there's 20 or 30 restaurants on it, and some are full and some are empty. Some have waiting and lines out the door, and others, they're begging people to come in with free beer. So just, yeah, just because, there's people doesn't mean they're going to eat at your restaurant. And just because there's people doesn't mean they're going to live in your assisted living home. So if you have a better one, and you were sharing a little bit about your experience, it was your grandma, you were saying.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, and it wasn't good. And imagine it being a really nice home in a single family home nearby that, where somebody can pay the same amount of money, but now they've got a home in a nice neighborhood versus whatever it was you were experiencing. So having that better place, there's a lot of opportunity in what we do.
Interesting. Okay, let me just make sure I understand or understood what you said, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of trying to understand feasibility, one of the big ones is making sure that you're not buying into a market where supply is saturated, right? Because usually that it can create some problems, especially if you're paying a premium for the asset, okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that you said was 20 minutes. Now, what would that 20 minutes be away from or near or to?
Sure. With the home itself, the location of the home, if you were to stay within 20 minutes of that. And the reason why we say that is because...
So a 20-minute radius of the home.
Correct.
For your target demographic.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Because realistically, somebody in the family is going to live close by to that location. So when I say within 20 minutes, more than likely somebody is in the family who's taking care of mom or dad, making the decisions. They live within 20 minutes of the home.
Okay, interesting. That makes a lot more sense. A lot more sense. Okay, so one of the things that you also said, which I really liked, is, hey, at the end of the day, this is still a business and you still have to compete for your customers, because I really like that, right? Because I've seen the opposite spectrum of that, right? What happens when a provider is getting way too comfortable and they're not competing for customers, right?
Yeah.
They're not maintaining a standard. So, when you look back on your career in this business, what are some of the elements of great facilities and great operators that you would include in these facilities to attract long-term customers, right? To differentiate yourself from the competition, to attract, in this case, residents.
Yeah. I think what's really important is to really make sure everybody understands the distinction that there is a real estate play, but there is the business side. And the business is where you really make the big money. Right. On the real estate, it's a matter of when you bought it in the current real estate cycle. Did you get a great deal or a good deal or a fair deal or a bad deal? But real estate prices do go up and down. We're in a cycle right now. We're always in a cycle. But the business side, really what it comes down to, why somebody will choose your home or live there long term, isn't anything to do with the real estate. I'm assuming it's in the right location. It's a nice house, all of that. It's the caregivers. It's the service. It's kind of interesting. I'll just briefly share. I'm sitting here in my car, which is unusual. I was on the way home, couldn't get there, so I pulled out the iPad. I'm here. It's not a virtual background. I'm in the driver's seat.
You should have said it was. It would have been even more impressive.
No.
Good, man.
I'm sitting here, but the concept of location, we were just talking about location, right?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I got it right.
No,
my train of thought went. But, the idea of where somebody lives and why they're there, this is why I said it. I'm sitting outside of one of the places I frequent, which is called Copper and Log. It's a craft kitchen beer. They have an amazing bartender in there. And I wasn't there earlier today, but maybe later tonight. My point is, the food's okay, but this bartender is great. So every time you go there, I can text him and it'll save me a seat. My wife and I will go there. So we love him. If he went someplace else, we'd go with him. Caregiving is the same thing. When you have managers and caregivers who love what they do and treat those seniors right, they're going to stay there forever. There's no reason to move. It may not be the biggest, best, nicest house, but if it's in the right location and all of the things are equal, it really comes down to the care that they're being given.
Okay, so, a couple things stand out there, right? And so I can really appreciate the business aspect of what you do. Okay. Because in my mind, it creates an opportunity, right? Because there's always a way to distinguish yourself when you're operating a business. And I think that's an area that's not talked about as much, but I think there's a huge opportunity to create distinction there. But your comments also make me ask a couple of other questions just based on my own experiences, right? And that is, for assisted living and just my own experiences here in San Diego and some of the other states, I know you can have two variations. You can have one where the owner is the operator. And they likely have to, I think, get, what is it called? My wife got this and she just couldn't stomach the business. So she was like, I can't do this. What is the licensing that you have to get?
In California, it's an administrator's license.
Administrator's license, yes.
Yeah.
So she passed the test, first try, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
And this was years ago. This was probably 14 years ago.
Wow.
Shadowed her aunt. And man, she was coming home crying every day. I said, hey, look, the good news is we know that this is not for you.
Right. Exactly.
Your heart's in the right place, but every day she was just sad, right?
Yep.
Now, one of the takeaways there, though, is, hey, you can either operate this as an owner-operator, okay, or you, at some point, depending on the scale of the business, you can bring someone in and hire them, right? I'm sure there's some requirements. What's the more common approach based on your experiences?
That's a great question, because I would say 70% of the homes that are being used for residential assisted living are what I call mom and pop operations. So the kids moved out, they've got extra bedrooms, and they say, well, I like seniors, I'll make some extra food, do some extra laundry, I'll take care of myself. So they're the manager, the caregiver, the cook, the baker, and the candlestick maker. Right. We don't do that. We operate it as a business. We pick the right location, we get the right house, we do the right renovations. And a lot of people in the industry consider what we do and we teach our students how to do as luxury assisted living. That's all in the eye of the beholder, right? But the point is, they're nice homes in nice areas. And I'm not the manager. I am not the caregiver. I'm not encouraging anybody listening right now to be either one of those. I hire the manager. The manager finds, trains, and retains the caregivers. And I may not go visit the house for 3 months. And that was even before we're all doing, a lot more things on Zoom and Skype and phone and so on. I don't need to physically be there. I need to empower them. I find that really interesting, John, because a lot of times people say, well, what are you going to do if somebody calls in sick? I don't know. What does the manager of a restaurant do if their employee calls in sick? The manager is the one who takes care of it. It's not the owner. The owner doesn't even hear about it till the end of the month when there's a quarterly report, and they're not even going to see the specifics. So don't get caught up in working in the business, work on the business.
Sure.
And the reason why this is a great business, I always like to say it this way, everybody's going to get involved in assisted living one way or the other. You're going to either own the real estate, leasing it to an operator, or you're going to be the operator, or you or a family member is going to be lying in a bed writing a check to somebody who does.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. Very, very true. Okay, so let me unpack some of that, because there are tons of nuggets in that, right? You mentioned a couple things, owner-operator, also lease back, which is more appealing to me. But then lastly, you said, you know what? I am not the person who's actually managing the staff.
Right.
Let's start from the back and let's move forward from the most complex to likely the easiest, which is leasing back the space. Okay. What do the metrics look like for me? I'll use myself as an example to be able to purchase real estate, put a business in place, and then provide care with management in place, to provide and actually have a going concern or a real viable business.
Sure.
Is it the 10 rooms, 20 beds? What does that look like for it to be viable, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you a little bit of metrics so you can all understand it. Keep in mind that in a single family home, there's only a certain number of people you can have. Every state's going to be a little different. For instance, as you mentioned in California, it's called something very specific. It's called an RCFE, Residential Care for the Elderly. The other name is board-in care. So in a California boarding care residential or RCFE, they're probably going to have 6 people in the home. Now, why 6 and why not more? The state will let you have more, but in order to have more than 6, you may have to have sprinklers or fire suppression. And certainly you're going to need to be able to do that within that neighborhood. And California is one of the most regulated places on the planet. We all know that. But also, a lot of people who are operating do it as mom and pops, and they're like, well, I'm going to be the manager and the caregiver, and I can only take care of 6 people anyway. I'm a business guy. I don't look at it that way. It's like, how many can I have? I can have 10, 15. Great. I'm going to find a really big house in a really nice area. I'm going to hire that manager who's going to hire the caregivers. So I'm going to give you a number, 10. And if we were to say that's the average size, 10 is a really good number. And the reason why is because your biggest expense is the labor. So the caregiver's taken care of. That's your biggest expense, not the house, nothing else. 40, 50% of your gross income is going to go to pay for the labor to take care of them. So if I have 10 residents, I'll typically have 2 caregivers during the day and 1 caregiver at night. And a manager could be a caregiver. So the caregiver could be acting as the manager. I'm probably not going to have a standalone manager unless I have a number of homes, and they're going to go to each one of the homes and oversee the caregivers. But the total expenses are going to be somewhere around 70%. So 70% of the gross income goes to all the expenses: labor, food, insurance, rent, and or debt service, and everything else. So that profit, that 20, 30%, is the profit that we make after all of that. Now, again, let's do the metrics. If you took that same house and said, let's name some numbers so it'll help people to think it through. It's an average size house, maybe a little bigger than average, 3,000 square feet. It is in an average America, which that house might be 350. In San Diego, that'd be 950, right?
Right.
But the point is, it would be more, and you're going to charge more. So let's just call it an average house of 400,000 to make our numbers easy. That $400,000 house itself, we could rent it out for $2,000 a month, and you're not going to break even, or you might just break even or make a little bit.
Sure.
But if you could double the rent, you're just on the real estate side and charge $4,000 a month or $6,000 a month to somebody who's renting it because they're going to operate the residential assisted living. They're going to make plenty of money. They can pay that high rent. So now you have a house that you can rent and cash flow, which works. Maybe it's a way to repurpose a lot of these big houses that people don't necessarily need or want anymore, but now you can use it for this purpose. But charging twice the market rent is kind of the point I'm trying to get to.
Sure.
That's kind of the normal metric. And somebody who's operating this business doesn't want a 1-year lease. They're probably going to want a 5-year lease with renewals. So if you're okay with the idea of charging twice the fair market rent with a 5-year lease with a low impact, occupant, then this could be a great real estate play for you. If you want to operate the business side, as I said, the metrics of it, about 70% of the gross income goes towards the expenses. The balance is your profit. You can do that very hands-off like I do and like we teach our students to do. So you can even do it in a different state. You don't need to be there every day. You don't need to go there at all. You will at the beginning, but it's a business. So you're going to have a manager who's operating that business. I went all around the board, but did you get what you needed there?
I really appreciate that. So, you said that the magic number is roughly 10.
Yeah.
It sounds like 10 residents.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is that? 10 residents, 3,000 square feet. What does that translate into rooms? Is it 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms? Ideally 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, but that's not always realistic.
And here's the reality. You're not going to find a 10 bedroom, 10 bath house.
Right.
And you're just not. There may be 1 or 2 of those, but not many. So you're going to convert space into. So if you're going to have 10, you're probably going to need at least the 5 bedrooms, 2 people in each bedroom. What I would do is I would try to get a house that could be converted so I can add more bedrooms or make a big bedroom into 2 smaller bedrooms. Seriously consider adding bathrooms, even half baths. But at the very minimum, you would need, for 10 residents, 5 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. My homes are 4, 5, 6,000 square feet. So the bedrooms, most of them are private. A lot of them have private bathrooms with them, because then you can charge more. And
Sure.
That's what somebody wants. If you bring your mom or grandma into the house, you're going to say, I'd like a private room with a private bath. Well, that's more expensive than a shared room with a shared bath.
Interesting. So, talking through this, one of the things that really stands out to me is that not all states operate the same, right? When it comes to regulation, especially just considering some of the things that we talked about. So I'm sure that there's some restrictions as it relates to how many residents you can have in a home, how many residents you can have in a room. Mm-hmm. Can you just really broadly just touch on that really quickly?
Sure. Yeah, 2 residents in a room is really acceptable, the norm. A few states let you do more than that. I don't encourage that at all. 2 in a room or 1 in a room, that's what you should go for. In regards to how many you can have, like I said, California, for instance, has no limit. You can have as many as you want, but the house has to be big enough, safe enough. It has to be approved in the community. So that's why a lot of people in California will just do 6, because it's a lot easier. A few states like Portland, like Oregon and Washington, limit it to 6 and 7 people. Arizona and Nevada are 10 people. Texas is 16. About 20 states are unlimited. But I'm going to tell you that when you get to 16 people, more than that, it's now feeling less homey and more institutional. But 16 is a great number too. The ratio of 5 to 1, 5 residents for 1 caregiver, that's a really sweet spot right there. A big box, just to give you a little feel for that. If you go to a Brookdale, a Sunrise, an Atria, a big box facility with 200 residents, they may have 20 caregivers during the day, but at night they may have 2. So during the day, their ratio might be 10 or 15 to 1 where we're doing 5-to-1, but at night there may be 2 people on staff to oversee 200 people in their room. So you can only imagine they're not getting great care, a lot of attention. They're just a number. Where in a home, it's a home, and it's 5-to-1. It's an actual home. You know the caregivers by name, then you become close to them. The residents do. So it's a really sweet situation. And you can also, like I said, the money part takes care of itself, but it's a real estate play as well as the business side.
Okay, great. So, it sounds like the caregiver is a huge component of this business, right? So how difficult is it to find and hire that type of talent, right? Because if your business is hinging on your ability to provide great care under regulation, right, under a regulatory requirement, then licensing, right, is really important, as well as your ability to find and qualify and train great caregivers, at least at a price that will allow you to operate going concern and provide great service. So can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe some of the opportunities, some of the challenges there?
Sure. Now, when unemployment rate was 3.5%, it was very different than it is today, where it's on 9%, right? It'll change and be different tomorrow. But the reality is you're always looking for good people. So I don't care what your business is, whether it's assisted living or you're looking for a handyman at your apartment building, we're always looking for good quality people. The other part is that when it comes to caregivers, they're not baristas at Starbucks. They're not retail store clerks. They're people that love seniors, love doing what they're doing. Like you explained, with your wife, the idea of you went through that, she came home not happy. That's not what you want. You want somebody who comes home energized and loving what they do and caring about those people. Right. So the caregivers that we have, many of them have been caregivers for a long time, years and years, some for decades. They love what they do and they're really great quality people. So here's the fact. It's actually gotten easier for us to find those people because this is the one business that did not get hit with labor shortages or people getting shut down. The caregivers are working every single day. The seniors still need care. Nothing changed at all, except there's a lot of people who are now saying, hey, here's an industry that didn't get shut down, never will, it can, and maybe I'll go that route. So it's easier now than it was before, but finding good people, finding, training, and retaining good people, no matter what you do, is always the key to your success.
Okay, and so roughly speaking, what is the average cost per hour? If you want to, put that into an hourly rate, if you want to quantify that in an annual rate, what would the average be, just to add some context to that cost?
Yep. So I'm going to give it to you this way, and keep in mind before I even say the number, the caregivers, just like you said, are the most critical piece. They're front line to the residents and the family. They typically get paid kind of minimum wage plus a couple of dollars. So when I say minimum wage plus a couple of dollars, minimum wage federally is $7.25, as crazy as that is. But some locations like Seattle, it's $15 an hour is minimum wage. So if you're in an area, let's just call it $10 an hour, those caregivers are making 10, 11, 12, 13 if they've been there for a long time. It's not a high paying job, right? It's really not. And it's a lot of work.
Gene, when I hear that, man, my ears perk up because it took me many years to figure out that, when you have people that are absolutely needed, okay, and they have to provide service to an industry where there's absolute demand, meaning demand is not diminishing, right?
Right.
That's an opportunity to differentiate yourself. So it took me a while, because I'm a slow learner, to realize that for our staff, we pay them really well. We pay them way over what the minimum wage is or whatever the going rate wage is. And we also give them the opportunity to participate as equity partners in all of our
Awesome. That's great.
And it took a while for me to figure that out. But, part of it, though, tied into our purpose, right? And the idea was, this was a friend of mine, he asked me the question, he goes, hey, John, how are you changing the lives? Here's the reality, man. I couldn't answer that because I wasn't, right? I mean, the reality, I wasn't really changing or improving their life. But I'm very grateful to him for asking that question because it forced me to think about what we needed to do to change that.
Wow.
And consequently, when we did that, guess what? Now they started turning around and showing the same kind of commitment to the residents. There's no mistake in that stuff, right? For some reason, we try to overcomplicate it, but there's really no mistake in that, in how that works. So the reason why that caught my attention is that really lies the opportunity, and it's a leadership opportunity, right? It's a leadership opportunity.
It is.
So very fascinating to me that an industry that requires so much attention and care and where there's absolute demand,
Yeah.
that, there's a big gap in how you can pay staff,
Hmm.
right? And how you can incent staff. Okay, great. I really appreciate that. Huge opportunity there. Huge
Yeah.
opportunity.
I got to speak to that for a second, though, because
Yeah.
you're a very smart entrepreneur to recognize that. And I think a lot of times people who are not entrepreneurs, they don't get that. They think it's about cutting costs and so on. But the way you said it, and it made me think the idea of how are you changing their lives? I mean, I do strive to do that, but I was never asked that or said that. That's a
I know.
really
I wasn't
important
either,
point. I don't
man.
want you to let that go. And I think that you can change a lot of lives. I always found it kind of interesting as a real estate investor. I love the fix and flip, the buy and hold, the whole bit. But let's face it, there's a lot of times where you buy something, you clean it up, you make it beautiful, you give the keys to that tenant, and they trash it in a year or two. And you feel bad. I'm not changing their lives. And, the $100 a month in profit isn't changing my life either. That's one of the things I love about what I do. And that's why our motto is do good and do well.
Yeah, I
make
saw
a
that.
lot of money. Yeah, make a lot of money, but you're doing good. You're helping the residents, their families, the caregivers, the managers, their families. And our mission is to impact 10 million people over the course of the next 10 years. And we're going to do that by training people and helping them start their homes.
Right.
We're heading there right now.
Yeah, I really like that, Gene. And I think that's where the opportunity is, right? It's really a leadership opportunity. And I like the operation side for that reason, because oftentimes in businesses that have been commoditized, I mean, the way to differentiate yourself is in how you lead your staff and then how you get them to also serve your customers. I mean, those two, they go hand in hand. And so I really appreciate you commenting on that. Huge opportunity in this space, and I like it for that reason. Okay, so we're approaching the end of our show, but I'm going to touch on this because I think it's a huge piece of tying this all together for our audience, and that is marketing. No business thrives without customers, right? So at the end of the day, we still have to be really good marketers. When I was on your site, a couple things that stood out is you made the comment of how to attract and find great customers. We still need customers, right, to be able to have a going concern or a business.
Yep.
So can you talk a little bit about that? Are these customers, or in this case, residents, are they being subsidized by the federal government, the states? Are there opportunities to do that? Or are they being supported by their retirement accounts and family, or is it predominantly family? Can you touch on that? And then how to find them?
We focus on what you would call private pay. So not Medicare or Medicaid, which would be public pay. The average person is getting maybe $2,000 a month in subsidies from a government. If you're going to focus on that, and keep in mind the average home is $4,000 a month, it's going to be really difficult for you to make a profit and give a good product and service if you're only collecting $2,000 a month. So we don't focus on Medicare or Medicaid. VA is great, but somebody who's a vet has to collect that and then pay it to us. So we focus on, in essence, private pay. The kids, 50, 60, they're the ones who are making the financial decisions for that parent. And the checks are $4, $6, $8, $10,000 a month per person, and it's going on for years. So how do you find them? It's really hard to cut through the noise in our world today. So Facebook ads and billboards and all that kind of stuff, especially in the last couple of months, oh my goodness, how crazy it's been. But the reality is just cutting through the noise can be difficult. So referrals is definitely going to be your best way. You have to earn a reputation. You don't just get it, and it's not a gift. You can't buy it. So have a good reputation, do a good job, earn it, and then ask for those referrals. So at the beginning, when you're starting this business and you don't have a reputation, you've got to earn it. Once you've got it, you keep it, then you ask for those referrals. And that's golden, because if your mom needed help, you're not going to look in, let me look for a Facebook ad. What you're going to do is you're going to talk to somebody who's been in the same situation, say, what did you do? Who did you go to? And if you're good, your name is given all around. And if you're bad, either it's not given or somebody's going to badmouth you. And sometimes it's easier to do that than you think. How many times have you passed a for sale sign, and it might be a real estate agent or broker, you called the number and got no response? I can't tell you how many times I've done that. It's crazy sick. It's terrible. I said to my son, who became a real estate agent, and I said, look, if you want to be a good real estate agent, the first thing you need to do is when somebody calls, you pick up the phone, you respond. The kid did like $10 million in sales in his first year. because of one thing. He was responsive. In our business, same thing. Be good, love those people, and provide a great product, a great service. Help them any way you can, and then ask for the referral. I know it sounds simple, but business is done one-on-one. You're not going to spend $10 million in marketing to fill a home. It doesn't make any sense. It's going to be your reputation and the referrals.
So high ticket item business, right? High ticket item still they're based on conversations.
Yeah.
So now one of the things that I've learned over the years, especially when it comes to whether it be referrals or just learning how to identify the place of greatest impact, right? So when you talk about referrals, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, where's the place of greatest impact? Where would I need to be spending most of my time and energy to create the greatest impact when asking for referrals? Because asking everybody doesn't create the greatest impact, right? There have to be some very specific people or places.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions around that, okay?
You got it.
All right. So the first area that I would think, and this is a question that I'm asking to you, right? It's more of a thought, would be the folks regulating the homes, the regulators, right? So if they come by and they have to do I don't know if it's a quarterly check, a monthly check to make sure that as an operator, I'm compliant, they probably would be a really good source of referrals. Maybe not. Okay. So who would you spend your time with asking for referrals?
You got it. Well, actually, the one you just described, I would not suggest that one. And it would be, here's what most people think I should go to the doctors and the nurses and the hospitals and go to case workers. Because a lot of the times, nobody moves into assisted living because they want to. They move there because they have to. They need help. So somebody, let's say, fell at home. Somebody's mother fell and they went to the hospital to make sure they're okay. At that point, they may talk to the nurse or the doctor there, or the case workers, they call it, and say, Mom needs help. What do we do? What are our choices? That referral directly from them is going to be golden. Let me give you another one that I thought would be great, and it wasn't, but I'll show you the twist. The little pro tip that we learned is church bulletins. If you go to any place to worship, you would think, okay, this person's sitting in the pew for 38 years. She sees the little ad on the back of the bulletin. Okay, brilliant idea, but bad execution. Here's why. Now she needs help, and her daughter is the one who's making the decision on where to go. Her daughter doesn't go to that church and read that bulletin. So the senior saw the ad for 38 years, but they're never going to call it the daughter. All right, so how do we get to the daughter? How do we get to the senior? Here's a brilliant one. This just came out at our Inner Circle Mastermind around our national convention. Right. And this is brilliant. I've been in this business for 7.5 years, never thought of it. How brilliant is this?
Share the goal, Gene. Share the goal.
Uber drivers that provide transportation for seniors. Now think about that for a second. An Uber driver who's transporting these seniors who are in their house, their next step is assisted living. These guys and gals are hustlers. Find those people, easy to find those hustlers, and say, look, anybody who you refer to me that moves into my residential assisted living home, I'll pay you a $500 referral fee. I mean, you got the best bird dogs in town, and I'm thinking, I never thought of that. It was one of our students who was brilliant.
Did it work? Does it work?
Yes, that's brilliant stuff. Think about that. Those Uber drivers, there's only a few that actually can transport seniors in wheelchairs or whatever it may be. Go to them, give them a box of donuts, a Starbucks gift card, and say, look, anybody you refer to me, here's the number. I'll give you $500 if they move in. That's brilliant stuff.
Interesting. So when you talk about caseworkers, can you qualify that? What does that mean?
When somebody goes to, let's say they go to a hospital, a senior goes into the hospital to see if they broke their hip when they fell. Somebody there at the nurse's desk is going to be assigned to them. That person is going to have a caseworker. So it's somebody who is overseeing, they're coordinating the doctors, the nurses, the treatment, whatever it may be. So it could be the nurse or a caseworker, but that's what I mean by caseworker.
And so are they hospitals or are they private care facilities?
Any and all above, yeah. Any place you can go that you can provide a service. Here's the way I always look at things, John, is the idea of how can I help that other person? Right. So let's say it is the nurse. It's like, nurse, how can I help you? Well, I don't need anything. Well, if I was to bring you something, like, let me switch it around. Let me switch it back to the church for a minute, because here's the other brilliant tip on that side. Hey, the bullet didn't work. I spent hundreds and thousands of dollars trying to make it work, but here's what does work. There's a ministry inside every church that goes and visits people who are at home who can't go to church.
I love that.
They're volunteers. Yeah, they're volunteers. So you just go to them and say, how can I help you? Well, I don't really need anything. how about if I bring a dozen flowers for each one of the people you're going to visit this week? How many people are you going to visit? Well, there's 20 people. I'll bring 20 dozen flowers to you. You can bring them to those people, give them to them in their homes. They will love you. The seniors will be appreciative. And the day they need to move into a home, you're the first one at the top of their list. In the meantime, bring them a box of coffee from Starbucks, a dozen donuts from Krispy Kreme. Make them feel good. They're volunteering. That costs you so little compared to Facebook ads or a billboard or something else.
Building a pipeline of love, huh, man?
I love that.
Pipeline of love.
Whoa. I'm going to use that, man.
Go ahead. And I'm not even going to charge you for it, Gene. I'm not even going to charge you for it.
Well, we can just... Hey, that's showing love right there.
Hey, bud. Well, we're at the end of our show, and I got to tell you, this has been really an amazing conversation. I've learned so much in such a short amount of time. And man, you've been a great guest. And I literally have 3 pages of notes here. So, my guest audience, the same, right? I want to thank you for being on the show, sharing your wisdom and your experiences. And I know, we're going to likely do some work in the future. I actually have a property in San Diego that I want to talk to you about, owned by a friend of mine. And he's a lender. He ended up taking the property back. Beautiful property. I think probably about 8 bedrooms. Right? So it kind of fits some of the things that you're talking about. And he's very open to a discussion like this.
Cool.
So I'm happy to connect the two of you, after the show. My question to you before we ask you to share how our audience can get in touch with you to learn more about your business and what you do is, what question do you have for me that you feel can add some value to our audience, since I've been asking you questions for a good 45 minutes?
So a question that I can ask you?
Yes, any question.
I guess, I'm going to just cut to the quick. If somebody in your audience right now is looking for either more information on this is one thing, but it could be the investment side. I really do think that a lot of times investors, they're not even sure why they do what they do.
Right.
We all started with fix and flip and wholesale because it's quick cash. Then we all realized, hey, if I get somebody to pay me regularly, it'd be great. So residual income. But if you really cut to the quick and decide what is your goal, what is your purpose, what's your big picture? And for a lot of people, the money thing can get in the way. I'm not really asking a question, just kind of ranting for a bit, not ranting, but just sharing the concept of, if your whole goal is to get enough positive cash flow so that you can go do fill in the blank, whether it be lie on the beach or make movies or whatever it is you want to do, get the money thing out of the way. Do you need 10 grand a month? Do it. You can do that with one residential assisted living home. You can do that with one apartment complex. So get that done, and now live out your purpose, because your purpose isn't grinding. It isn't working 18 hours a day till you're 65 and then you keel over because you got no energy left. That is not your purpose. Figure out what you really want to do, what your passion is. And then from there, just figure out the best way to do it. And also, you said this, John, and I'm going to just back it up. The concept of, you got to love what you do. And if you don't love what you do, stop doing it. You don't need to. Man. Yeah. Somebody else will do it. Find something you love. You'll be really good at it. You'll be the best at it. People appreciate you. They'll pay you for it. But you're really making everything, you and everything around you, a better place, better situation. And if you do that, the world will function much better. So find your spot and do it. And if it's residential assisted living, fantastic. I can help you with that. And if it's not, fantastic. It's your thing, not mine.
Awesome, buddy. Awesome. I really appreciate that. And so, Gene, how do people get in touch with you to learn a little bit more about, what you do, or maybe they might have some questions for you?
Yeah. I wrote a book this year that I'd be happy to give everybody a copy. I'm going to give you a website. It's really simple. You can go there, download the book for free. You can buy it on Amazon if you'd love to, or you can go ahead and there's webinars and you can call us, but it's RAL101.com. So residential assisted living, 3 letters, RAL101.com. You can download the book. You can watch some webinars and give us a call if you want to have a conversation. There it is.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Really appreciate that. We're going to add that to the show notes. And Gene, I want to wish you continued success.
Thank you.
Until next time, my friend, keep living big, bud.
You got it. Do good and do well. We'll see you soon.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Clarity of purpose creates our greatest competitive advantage. When we transform apartment buildings to thriving communities, we improve how people live and create assets with high profit margins. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this up with a friend. I'm John Brackett, bringing you things you can implement right away.